Welcome to the resistance. We're here tonight to take on the gerontocracy. I want to welcome everyone. I'm Larry Platt from the Philadelphia Citizen. Before I turn it over to Roxanne Patel Shepalavi, who will moderate tonight's program. I'm obviously too old to moderate tonight's program. The whole idea here is to get rid of folks like me, old farts like me, as we've originally called this panel. Let me make a couple thanks and give a couple of announcements, and then we'll get right to it. First, our partners on this event, Young Involved Philadelphia, which has been changing the landscape of Philadelphia for 20 some odd years, injecting new blood into our process. So thank you to YIP. New Leaders Council of Philadelphia, there we go. Yeah. So we should say that on our stage is a proud graduate of the New Leaders Philadelphia cohort, Mayor Paige Cognetti from Scranton. Oh, two? Was Isaiah in that too?
First class.
Wow. I expect nothing but first class from you, so that's cool. That's great. Philly 3.0. Did I see Allie Perlman here? Allie and John Geeting. Awesome. Let's give a round of applause for Philly 3.0. And our venue host, Fitler Club. This is a real jewel of Philadelphia. If you haven't taken a tour, see Ralph Thorne there. Ralph, raise your hand. We'll arrange to get you to look at the rest of the club. And finally, our bookseller tonight, A Novel Idea on East Passyunk, who are here selling Amanda Litman's book, Run for Something, which is terrific, and you'll hear all about Amanda's quest. I also want to quickly plug our next events. Friday, May 20th at Drexel, we'll have the next installment of our Development for Good series, Olmsted 200, a film screening, panel discussion, and reception celebrating Frederick Law Olmsted, the father of American landscape architecture, and we'll have filmmaker and public historian Lawrence Cotton. That is not here, that's on the campus of our partner Drexel University. We will be here the morning of Tuesday, May 31st. I will be in conversation with MSNBC anchor, Citizen board member, and the smartest bald man on television, Ali Velshi. Ali is straight from 6 weeks of reporting on the front lines of Ukraine. We'll talk about what he saw, how that reporting has changed him, how it should change us, and what we can do to aid Ukraine. And we'll also get into some thoughtful media criticism of how we're covering that war and other wars. If you don't know Ali, it will be a fascinating, as good as he is on TV, he's smarter and better looking in person. And then I think you guys will really be interested in a book event we have on Monday, June 27th. I'll be here talking to Dan Pfeiffer, host of Pod Save America, about his new book, Battling the Big Lie, How Fox, Facebook, and the MAGA Media Are Destroying America. I've just started to look at this, and he goes in this, how the right-wing media apparatus works. A very thumbnail sketch of where it came from and what people can do to fight back against disinformation and misinformation. And lastly, let me just give a self-interested plug for the Citizen. We're trying to do events like this because we are not a typical media organization. We're not about just sending information out into the ether. We're about literally defibrillating democracy in the American city where it was born. I was just telling Amanda that we celebrate 25% turnout in the birthplace of American democracy. That should be a stain on all our souls. So we're committed to doing events like this, to doing calls for civic action, and to doing solutions journalism that motivates people, motivates citizens to take up virtual arms against the status quo. So I ask you to join us in this movement, a movement of citizens in the birthplace of democracy, by becoming a member, by attending these events, by getting fired up, and by doing something about a status quo culture in Philadelphia that leadership culture that never seems to change. So with that rant out of the way, I turn it over to the heart and soul of the citizen, our editor, Roxanne Patel-Shepelavi. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ed. You all hear me? Thank you. I also would like to ask for your support in encouraging Larry to put sunscreen on his head when he goes out in the sun. He burns. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you and to be on this stage. I'm really honored to be on the stage with these 4 total superstars who are on their way to changing the city, the state, and this country into the place that I think everybody here would like it to be. Let me do a quick introduction of everybody here. Amanda Litman, a former Obama administration staffer, co-founded Run for Something and wrote the book, which you can buy in the back corner over there. A national organization that recruits and supports young progressives running for office, including 640 who have been elected to local positions in 48 states. A couple of those people are local to Philly, including Nikhil Saval, Rick Krajewski, and Malcolm Kenyatta. City Council member Isaiah Thomas, bringing some gender diversity to the stage here, is one of 2 millennials in council, both of whom were elected in 2019. He has already made a national splash and a local splash, including with his nationally recognized legislation that banned minor traffic stops, something that disproportionately affects African American drivers. Representative Joanna McClinton, the leader of the Democratic Party in the state legislature, is a former public defender. She represents West and Southwest Philly and parts of Delaware County in the Pennsylvania State House. She's the first woman and first African American to serve as Democratic Party leader in the House. And finally, Paige Cognetti, I've used your middle name, is the mayor of Scranton, Pennsylvania. So those of you who pay close attention to the citizen, which I'm sure is all of you, may recall that we talked to Mayor Cognetti at our 2020 Virtual Ideas We Should Steal Festival. So I'm really happy to have her here in person with us. We had her in conversation with Mayors Randall Woodfin of Birmingham, Alabama, and Savanti Myrick of Ithaca, New York. We love to talk to young mayors who are making change, so I'm really glad to have her here with us. So I'm gonna talk to these 4 people for a little while, and then I'm gonna kick it to you guys to ask some questions. But I'd like to start by reading just a couple of lines from Amanda's really quite brilliant book, which does a couple things. It lays out why it's important for people who are engaged citizens to engage by running for office. It tells you really straight up how hard it is, and also why that shouldn't matter, which I found compelling. But here's what she said. She said, and I should be clear that this book was written in 2017. 2017.
I was very mad at the time. Still am.
In fact, that's what I'm going to read about. My anger is indiscriminate. I'm angry at the institutions that have failed me. I'm angry at the people who didn't believe elections matter. I'm angry at the old white men in government who think they understand my problems as a 20-something woman in America, but have never had to deal with paying for an IUD or negotiate for equal pay at a job. And don't get me started on the ones who still have to be taught how to check their own email. I'm angry at a system that makes it so hard to run for office, and at a party that perpetually encouraged rich lawyers to run and then seems shocked to find itself without a diverse pipeline of talent. But very little angers me more than people who complain endlessly without offering solutions or trying to fix the problems. So I wanted to read that because I wanted to kind of set up a little bit the idea that everybody here is inspired to make change for one reason or another, and Amanda's words may speak to all of you. But Amanda, you started Run for Something in 2017. Can you tell us a little bit about what it does and how's that anger?
Sure. So Run for Something was born of the ashes of the 2016 election. I worked for Hillary for 2 years. I was her email director, so not the emails that Fox News talked about, the ones that she sent asking for money. And it was a privilege and a joy, and election night 2016 was the most heartbreaking personal and professional failure of my entire life. But a week after Election Day, I got a message from someone I went to college with. Hey, Amanda, I'm a public school teacher in Chicago. If Trump can be president, seems like anybody can do this. I want to run for office. They keep cutting our budgets, and I want to run for office. You've been working in this space for a while. Who do I call? And I didn't have an answer for them. Because at the time, if you were young, he was in his 20s, if you were newly excited about politics and you wanted to do more than vote and more than volunteer, if you wanted to actually lead, there was nowhere you could go that would take your call. And that to me felt like a symptom of really big problems in our democracy and more specifically the Democratic Party. So I reached out to a whole bunch of people, one of whom became my co-founder, this operative named Ross Morales Ricchetto. We wrote a plan and we built a website, and I was unemployed, so I had nothing but time. And we launched Run for Something on Trump's inauguration day. And we thought, this will be small. Nobody wants to run for office. And like every professional operative we talked to, as we were getting feedback on our strategic plan, was like, this is a great idea, but nobody's gonna do this. It's really hard to recruit, especially young people. We launched on Trump's inauguration day, thought we'd get 100 people in the first year, and this would be our hobby while we got real jobs. We had 1,000 people sign up in the first week. As of today, we're up to more than 113,000 young people all across the country who've said, I want to run for office, what next? And they have been able to channel that fury and that rage and that fear and in many ways that hope that things could be better into campaigns, and many of them win, and then they govern, and then they do good things. And they turn that fury that I still feel, oh God, especially right now, I'm so fucking angry. I'm going to curse a lot, I apologize. I do it in the book too. My grandma wasn't pleased, but whatever. They're so able to make me think that actually government can be good when you get good people in it. And it won't make you so mad. It will make you feel hopeful and inspired, and like public service isn't this slimy thing that only rich old white men do. It is something that people who care step up and lead and take ownership of. So that's what Run for Something does.
That's great. So one of the things that, Leader McClinton, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that Amanda talks about in her book is that women often underestimate their abilities and think that and underestimate their likelihood of winning. So I know that you were a public defender, you worked for State Senator Anthony Williams before jumping into to run for an open seat in your district. But you at first were hesitant, right? You at first were not going to do that. And was that this idea that maybe you were not the right person for it? What was it that changed your mind, and why'd you do it?
So I am one of the women that it takes 7 times to ask. That is the statistic. I'm sure it's in the book. I'm going to buy one. But it takes 7 times to ask a woman to run for office because unlike our male counterparts, we often definitely minimize our skills, minimize our experience, and also even just in the regular professional world, the studies are that we don't even apply for regular jobs if we don't check every single bullet point when they say minimum requirements. So it carries over into the political world, and I'm so appreciative that although my senator I was working for, Williams, mentioned it, and I was like, oh no. And I wasn't interested because I was staff, and I was closely familiar with the hours and with the, working around the clock in Harrisburg, and then getting home and having your neighbors say, you don't do anything. And I'm like, I'm not going to be as gracious as you, Senator, when somebody says I don't do anything and I've been working around the clock in Harrisburg. Like, are you kidding me? And 2 hours from home, missing everything? And just all the personal things that women usually take into account more than men. What about our families? Who's going to take care of our families? Do we have a family? Are we planning one? I mean, how is this going to be a problem or a real barricade or obstacle to me, having my personal goals realized? Is politics going to interfere with that? And so ultimately, although it took several asks, although I was just not interested, I had a very short time because of the special election, and I had to literally confront my own fear and say, what are you afraid of? And if I'm only afraid of losing, that's not a reason not to run. If I'm only afraid of being publicly embarrassed because I don't have enough votes, that's not a reason not to run. Because what I ultimately decided was I'm going to be at work in the Senate in Harrisburg thinking I could have been a state rep. And I could have loved that job. But no, I was too scared. So I said, I'm out of my head. I'm going to go ahead and run and see if I can find another opportunity similar to my time at the public defender's office, which is a job hard as hell, but it's so fulfilling. It's a crazy thing, right? Hard work that is not really going the way you need it to every time you go in a courtroom, but still in and all of it, you're just truly fulfilled with doing that work.
That's fantastic. So I love the setup that if the worst thing that could happen is you just don't get enough votes, and thinking that maybe that's not that big a deal is actually kind of inspiring, right? That's kind of like that's a little bit of what you say. We're like, it's hard, but just do it anyway. So Mayor Cognetti, I know that you moved to Scranton because you fell in love with the man who made you a sandwich at a local family-owned deli, and that you're running for office when you were pregnant, right? Not to mention your winning upset a lot of people, including the Democratic Party machine in Scranton. You actually ran as an independent, is that right? And it speaks to the notion that oftentimes those who are in power expect young people to wait their turn. So tell us why you decided to run, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so our story in Scranton is unfortunately built on a foundation of corruption. Scranton in northeastern Pennsylvania, we have had, over the last decade and change, we've had judges, county commissioners, an attorney general, the mayor of Scranton in 2019 go to prison for crimes related to their office. And when I moved from New York City in 2016 to be with my now husband, it was the middle of all that, but it was at a lull point. By 2017, the Auditor General, then Eugene DePasquale, had come out with this scathing report about what was going on in the Scranton School District. So there was an opening, somebody retired right after the election, it's like late November 2017, somebody retired. A friend of mine that I had made said, you really should run for that appointment. And I gave it a little bit of thought, but realized that I felt like I had an obligation to do that my professional background meant that if I could lend any sort of governance, any sort of good government practice to the Scranton School Board, that would be a good thing. I wasn't supposed to win. There were 9 people up. There was somebody on there that gave me too many points. I was not supposed to be the winner that was reported the next day. And people in the machine, so we ran in 2019, Paige Against the Machine, they still don't want me there, right? I was told when, in 2019 when the mayor got indicted and there was a special election, I was very pregnant. I think I was 6 months pregnant when we announced and, ready to have the baby by the time the election came. I was told, I won't vote for you because you're pregnant, you're gonna have a small child, you should be at home. There's some great letters to the editor from January, February 2020 when people didn't have much to do pre-pandemic, little did they know. I was a degradation of our society. I belonged at home with that baby. I also was told I couldn't run as a woman. I am the first female mayor of Scranton. I also was told that I don't have an Irish last name, so I cannot win. And I mean, dead serious by multiple people with master's degrees and in very successful professional opinions, just completely serious. Just set your expectations. You don't have an Irish last name, you're not going to win. So there was just so many things that people were trying to cue me to stop or not run as hard. I mean, it wasn't to actually set my expectations, right? It was to tamp down my success, to try to hope that I wasn't going to win, or if I did win, that I wouldn't be successful. Because it was a special in 2019, I had to run again last year in 2020. We just call it the Old Boys Club because that's what it is. The local party machine ran the city controller against me. He ran a nativist campaign. The sign said Scranton Native all over the city. It was not well received. It was a great example. We ended up winning with 72% of the vote in the primary. People didn't want that that machine politics, like it's over. But what got us there was that rock bottom point. What got us there was the mayor going away in handcuffs, which is sad, but it's an opening, and we'll take it. If that's what it takes to get a woman mayor in Scranton, then that's what we'll do. I will say that I was thinking in 2019 when we won, okay, well, this is great. So as we go, we're going to have lots of young people, young women, not of the usual crowd that are going to run for office. And it's been really tough in the last 2 years because that bench we just haven't built that bench yet, and I'm not sure what it is, and I'm hoping that getting to know Amanda will help. We're still struggling. There is so much anger, but there's something blocking people from running, and I want to learn what that is too. I can lead by example all I want, but I got to bring people along with me.
That's such a great story. Councilman, I want to ask you a similar question. You the first time you ran for city council, you were like 25 years old, right? And then you ran for the third time in 2019, and along with like 50 Philadelphians who were in the primary that year, which was incredible and says something about Philadelphia politics. But I'm curious, and I remember we ran a guide to like all the people who are running and looking at all people from all these different backgrounds and all different parts of the city who are running for office, and thinking, wow, these are people who want to stand up in this city that we keep thinking hits a pretty low point and then I guess doesn't quite. And so I guess I'm curious, what made you think and believe that you could be one of the 17 people making decisions for, legislative decisions for 1.5 million Philadelphians?
Yeah, these stories are so inspiring. Mine is just a little different. Rep. McClinton talked about, the worst thing that happened when you lose is you just didn't get enough votes. She's right? I've lost twice, and at the end of the day, every time I lost, I felt like I won at the end of the race. I take a lot of pride in New Leaders Council because New Leaders Council was the fellowship initiative that I went through that basically told me that I was going to lose before Election Day the first time I ran, right? Because I was learning everything I should have done prior to the race. Right, so it's like every workshop, every weekend, once a month, I'm coming back with notes that's telling me, oh man, I'm going to lose this race because I haven't done this at all. So that part for me was, I like to call myself a theoretical practitioner through that whole process. But in 2011, when I lost that race, I also knew I was going to run again on Election Day. And that for me was really my perseverance and my willingness to just learn what I didn't know and try to apply those things as it related to the next couple years and trying to build a quality campaign. I think the reason that I felt like I could be one of the 17 was because the times I ran before, I felt like I had produced a better race every time. And after I lost in 2015, in my mind, I actually wasn't going to run again. In my mind, I felt like I was really done. And I ended up getting government experience. And I think what ended up happening was, even though the race in 2019 was so crowded, it wasn't as competitive, right? So if you know about campaigns, for me, because I had so much experience at that point running so many times, as well as volunteering in other races, what we seen with the 2019 race was, number one, you had vacancies, right? So when there's a vacancy, that always opens up opportunities similar to some of the narratives that you heard up here. That's a little different. But then also, I don't think a lot of people noticed, the 2015 race produced about 7 people who raised over $150,000 in loss, right? So I was one of the, maybe not 7, maybe 5. It was 5 people that raised over $150,000 that lost, and it was a 6th person who didn't raise that much but had great ballot position and lost. So when I looked at 2019, while there were more people running, the race wasn't as competitive because there wasn't enough money, right? Anybody who knows anything about running for office, is one thing to have the inspiration and the will, right? That is great, but it's into the ability to govern. All of those things are great, but it requires a little bit more than that, and part of it is money, and honestly, I'm always gonna say a part of it is luck too. I think being at the right place at the right time with the right support and the right people, that's a part of it as well too. And sometimes the chips fall your way and sometimes it don't. And I think in 2019, I was lucky enough for the chips to kind of fall my way that time, based on some track record work that I had done prior to it. But, you know, again, the opportunity was there, and I think people courted me to run. And that was really the first time, right? Like 2011, that was me. I want to make a difference. 2015, oh, I lost in 2011. I'm going to do better this time. 2019 was more people telling me, you know, this is your time. And I think that's different, and that also resonates with some of the stories that was told prior to mine.
Yeah, so Amanda, we at The Citizen, you focus on local politics and Run for Something intentionally, which we at The Citizen try to convince people is what matters most in our lives and in our politics. Can you talk about that a little bit? Why local politics?
Local politics is good for politics and good for policy. Let's talk about policy first. They're just saying the lower down the ballot, the closer to your door. Think about the things that affect your quality of life and your day-to-day experience. It's the quality of your kids' schools, which is determined by like school boards or boards of education. You know, it depends who runs it. I don't know who runs it in Philadelphia, but in most places it's school boards or boards of education. The quality of your streets that you drive on, which is often city council or state legislature. The types of businesses that are able to open. The amount of affordable housing that's accessible or available, which again, is city government. Whether your trash gets picked up and your water is clean, whether your libraries are well funded and what books are available there, whether your community center has interesting programming and your community health centers are well funded and well staffed. The things that affect your day-to-day experience are not being decided by what happens in Washington. They're being decided what happens in community centers and city halls and state legislatures across the country. And especially right now, when what's happening in DC is bullshit, we are seeing the incredible urgency of local governments standing up and advancing our values in a way that I think we have never seen before. On politics, local government is how you build a party. A party does not come from some sort of bigger force. It doesn't come from the DNC or RNC capitals and those gross buildings in DC. It comes from precinct by precinct, door knocking, building voter files, electing city council members and school board members and election judges and probate judges, who then become mayors and state legislatures, who then become members of Congress and governors and senators. The way that you get better members of Congress is by electing better mayors and state legislators and city council members. Focusing locally is where you get to live the day-to-day experience of the elections you're engaging in. I also think it just feels so much better and more sustainable than caring about what happens in Washington, and I say this having worked in national politics for my entire career up until we started Run for Something. If I had to give a shit about Joe Manchin every day, I would lie down and never get up again. That instead I get to care about the city council in Berkeley and the state legislature in Harrisburg and the amazing work that the Waterloo, Iowa City Council is doing to grant pregnancy loss leave to all city employees. Like, that's cool. That feels good. That's winning. So it's good. It's better.
So you mentioned the state legislature in Harrisburg, which a lot of eyes are on these days, because, of course, to your point, a lot of politics plays out on state level, and we're going to see that pretty soon when the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. And it's going to be a state issue, right? Pennsylvania is going to be certainly a focus of that. So, Representative McClinton, you know, there's a lot of talk about these being unprecedented times, and usually that's for all the most terrible reasons, and it's hard to argue with that. But I have to say, you represent change that actually feels good. It feels like a positive step for things, right? So you're the first woman and first African American to lead a party in the state legislature, which is significant when you look in particular at our legislature. Pennsylvania is 31st in the country in the number of female lawmakers, with only about 30% of the entire body being women, which is high, actually, for us. We've never had a woman as governor. We've never had a woman as senator. Until 2018, I think, we hadn't had a woman representative for 20 years. We've never had a mayor of Philadelphia who's a woman, although that may change after next year. And it had been more than 40 years since a person of color was a party leader in Harrisburg. And now there's you. All of which is to say, you're leading a group of elected officials who mostly don't look like you, are mostly not women, and are not as young as you. So how do you get them to follow where you lead?
Stay tuned.
Okay, moving on.
No, it is definitely a change. Was a write-up recently comparing my leadership to our immediate past leader, who was party leader for 11 years, Frank Dermody, who I admire, love, respect. And they were just, comparing us. Frank did spend a little time as a PD, but he was a career prosecutor, Western Pennsylvania, 30-something years in the legislature. And then there's me, 6 years in the legislature, public defender, woman of color. So I think my colleagues are sending a message, to those who are paying attention to Harrisburg, that they have the confidence that a woman can do this job, although one has never done one previously. We did have an African-American speaker, Kay Leroy Irvis, was at one point party leader in the early 70s. But they're sending a message, and in terms of how to get them to follow, the first key for me every single day at the start and sometimes until the evening is to listen. My colleagues want me to hear their perspectives. They want me to understand their constituencies. My colleagues right here in Philadelphia, we have different constituencies all in one city. So imagine all the way out to Erie or all the way up into Scranton, how different the viewpoints are and life is and the challenges are. So I start off by listening to their concerns. And then the next thing that I do is work closely with the other leaders on our leadership team, and sometimes they just want to talk to me because I'm the leader. So sometimes they don't want anyone else to know. But it's like really trying to be creative to get them solutions to their issues. And it's really reminiscent for me as my time either as a public defender or my years as a youth leader in youth ministry at church. Listening to issues and then getting creative with a solution. Because when you're in court and you're looking at a mandatory minimum and somebody's on videotape, there are not a lot of opportunities. But if you build good relationships with the folks who are also in court, the judge, the jury, the DA, you're able to get creative about other ways to approach these problems. And so I do the same thing with my members. I listen to them and then make every effort to say, how can we get us closest to the solution? What's the best case outcome? Or what's the minimizing the damage to whatever they are? And the honest surprise for me is just the biggest gap almost in just experience. When you become a state representative, you are in fact, in charge of your office. That doesn't mean you have an HR background. That doesn't mean you've been trained in, human resources and personnel management. You're given a lot of responsibilities all at once. And one thing I've been trying to do in my leadership is make sure that we avoid as many challenges and problems and interpersonal issues, because they end up coming up to my office, even though it's not my district and not my issue, so that we can actually serve our folks well, but also keep everything above board. It's government. We're not some company. So things shouldn't be happening, in the dim of night. It should be above board.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I didn't really think about that aspect of the job. You think about the aspect of the job that's the forward-facing one, where you have the mics in front of you, but you're actually helping people run their little mini companies. Mayor Cognetti, you talked about being an outsider and actually running. Still sort of being an outsider in this most recent campaign where it was a nativist. And I've seen you describe your approach to governing as not sexy, about structural reform and economic equity and justice and ensuring the city's political leaders look like the city. Scranton, under your watch, has finally been declared no longer financially distressed after 30 years. Which I had written as something different and then realized the exact phrase is that it's no longer financially distressed, which doesn't mean it's financially really flush, right? So it's and it's under your watch. And so, that does seem unsexy, but of course critical. And I'm wondering, have you been able to accomplish things that your predecessors and other sort of longtime leaders haven't because you're an outsider? You said you thought that was part of what powered your reelection, but even policy-wise, how did that affect it?
So a lot of the things that had not been tended to for decades were because so-and-so had that contract, and well, it was so-and-so's family member, and I kind of let that one go. And there are just a lot of those things add up, right? Especially at the, well, still at the state and federal level too, but at the local level, it's much more visible. So there's some of these things that we've been able to do. We've done it very graciously, and we've just bid out the contracts we need to bid out. We've put together an incredible team to look back and find some things that aren't great, that we're slowly, carefully, again, graciously. We're not trying to out anybody for not doing a great job before. We're just trying to fix the problems and fix them in a permanent way. And most of this is about gaining trust. So no one is going to trust a government that has a mayor go to prison, right? I mean, we have these contractors were being extorted for permits for years. So, we still have trust to build back. We still have, somebody yesterday at a Mother's Day diaper drive said, you owe me $300 for my refuse fee. And I said, all right, well, the process is in December. The checks go out in January. He's like, I'm not going to get it. It's the city. And I was like, sir, we're not trying to fleece you, really. We will get that $300. This is the timeline. He's like, are you sure? Is your door open? And it wasn't me. It was somebody that I've worked very closely with. She's a resident. She said yes. And that really was a really nice moment for me to have somebody back me up from a constituent. But those little interactions show that what we're doing is working, right? The fact that I'm in the weeds on making sure that our OpenGov platform allows us to see which properties are exempt from refuse because they're empty more than 10 months of the year, it is not sexy. But that man's trust, when he gets that check in January, his faith that we can do good things in government will lift. His neighbors, he will talk to his neighbors about it. Hopefully he'll vote. I don't know if he's a voter, but hopefully if he wasn't, he's a voter, or he'll actually want to go vote. And maybe he only votes for president, but maybe he'll start voting in local elections. Maybe he doesn't go all the way down the ballot, but maybe he'll start going all the way down the ballot to city council. So a lot of it's not sexy. You got to want the job, and that's a big thing. You see so many people across national, federal, state, where I think, did you look at the job description before you ran for office? Like, being mayor, talk about human resources. I have 500 employees. Most of my time is human resources issues, right? I'm sure that Leader McClinton is obviously the same. You gotta know the job you're getting into, and you're not going to be successful if you're not applying for a job you want. And I do think women tend to look at those job descriptions a little better, and I think once we get into these offices, they're generally things that we want to be doing. Councilmember Thomas, I know that you want to be there too. You read that job description. But that's another piece of this, is we've got to make sure that people are running not just for something, but for a job that they want and they'll be good at, and that'll help us a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. To think people like to see their name in lights, right? But the sort of doubling down on it not necessarily being a sexy job is makes people less inclined to want to run. But Councilman, you've received national acclaim and, of course, some criticism for your driving equality bill. And along with the other millennial on council, Catherine Gilmore Richardson, you also created the Illuminate the Arts program, which set aside $1 million to support artists impacted by the pandemic and moving forward, right? And both have struck me as very much a reflection of the moment we're in, both what the bills are and the ability to have them actually come to fruition. And so how do you think your youth has influenced the kinds of issues that you push for in council and your ability to sort of convince your colleagues to go along with it?
So I think my youth has is a big part of the innovation of the ideas, but I don't think it's a big part of convincing my colleagues. I'll say the ideas in the youth side first. The driving equality bill is easier, right? Like, I grew up in the era of stop and frisk, right? So think about when Michael Nutter is campaigning in 2007, right? He's campaigning on 2000 frisk. I remember arguing with my dad, like, dude, how can you vote for this? Like, I am just getting on the road right now. Like, you brought my car. Why would you think that this is a good vote? No shade to Michael Nutter. Like, I don't, like, this is where we were at that time. He ends up winning. Clearly, he ran a great campaign, right? And at the end of the day, when you talk about the experiment of stop and frisk, right, that's my generation, right? We are the generation of young people who were pulled over time and time and time again as a method to deter crime. So part of my inspiration to run for office is definitely going to be lived experiences. I'm a former teacher, so when I ran in 2011, I was campaigning to get rid of the SRC before it was really a hot thing, because that was in my direct space. I was campaigning for police reform before it polled high, because that was in my space. That was my lived experiences. So naturally, my youth is going to be a part of that because of the generation that we grew up on and the things that we experienced growing up. When you talk about the Illuminate the Arts grants, I think that that's a generational thing as well, too, because a big part of what we want to push for is transparency. Similar to what the mayor talked about around trust. I think one of the things that people don't know about the Illuminate the Arts grants is the members of the Arts and Culture Task Force help select the recipients of the grants. And we did that on purpose because we don't want people to think that this is us giving money to our friends or us giving money to our buddies. You know, myself and Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson, we had no say-so in the recipients of the grant. We help outline the program so we can make sure that the demographic that it goes to is a demographic that's in need the most. But the program was so successful last year that we did come back this year with the second round. So I think those two things right there are definitely tied directly to my youth and my lived experiences. The ability to get stuff done, I think, is really tied to my experience being a coach. I still coach high school basketball right now. If anybody's a sports person, I sit on the board for PIAA District 12, which represents sports all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And when you approach things, in my mind, from a team perspective, you put yourself in a position where you always think about your colleagues, right? When it's done right, the legislative branch of government actually should be a team when it's done right. We see so often where it's not done right, which is why a lot of us don't like spending time or political capital in D.C., because it's gotten us away from the idea of the concept of the legislative branch of government working together. And I think my approach on city council has been to try my best to build an individual relationship with every member of council. And I think that's what I've done, is try not to put my colleagues in a position to be able to have to take tough votes, to try to put them in a position where I'm as supportive as possible. And then in turn, maybe the youth factor does come into play, because I think they all view me as like a little brother. I would bet KGR would say the same about her being a little sister. But I think that comes part with the personality, right? When you're a freshman on a team, when you're a rookie on a team, it's not like I can't be a factor, right? We're all watching Maxey right now. He's a huge factor on the Sixers team, but he is operating with a certain level of humility, right? Like at no time is he really challenging James Harden or, trying to say that he should be the number 2 option over Embiid, over Tobias Harris or James Harden. Is that type of approach that I think I bring to the legislative branch of government that puts me in a position where my colleagues won't look at me and say, well, I'm not going to vote for this because I don't want to see you win, right? How often in politics do people like the idea but don't like to sponsor the bill? So you'll say, well, I like that idea, but I don't really want to see that person get a win, so I'm not going to vote for that. And I think that's the narrative that I've tried to move away from, and I think that's what's puts me in a position to have some success so far.
That's great. I mean, it is impressive, though, you got people to sign on to something that they may very well not have done 5 years ago, right? So those of us who are really no longer young have been told for years now that it's the younger generation that's going to turn things around for the country, who have like values that reflect our American promise and are driven to see that come to bear for everyone. And we're still waiting. Amanda, part of what Run for Something does is recruit people to run for office. You ask women 7 times if you need to. So what's your elevator pitch to them?
You can do this. You have to do this. You need to do this. We will help you. I think especially for young people, young women, young people of color, young LGBTQIA folks, they don't see themselves in leadership. For this incredible group of young elected officials, the average age in the United Senate is 63, the average age in the House is 58, 32 out of 50 US governors are over the age of 60, the median mayor, I believe, is 57 to 59, median school board member is 59, fewer than 5% of state legislators are under the age of 35. There are not a ton of role models. It's what makes these people so exceptional. So what we try and do with the at this point, more than 113,000 young people who've raised their hands to say, I want to run, is show them the examples, is highlight the stories of the young people like Catherine Richardson on the city council, like Malcolm Kenyatta in the state legislature, and Jessica Benham and Jennifer O'Mara, and these amazing young people who've said, I'm willing to step up and change my life to do this. And then we walk them through the process. And I think, that sticking point of, okay, I want to do this, but now what, is where party operators and institutions and the old boys club have closed the door and said, no, you probably can't raise money, which is usually what they mean when they say you can't win, is you can't raise money. You aren't what we think a leader looks like, which usually means rich, old, white, and man. And we don't really think it's your turn, which is, again, a shortcut for the other two things. You're not what a leader looks like, and you can't raise the money. What we do is say, you can do this, and here's how. We have guides on how to file to get on the ballot. We have a network of people who will coach you through the process. We have a regional director who will literally and figuratively hold your hand as you go and turn in your petition signatures. We have a network of alumni we've worked with, now more than 2,000 people strong, who, if you are a new mom who just is running for mayor, we will connect you to the new mom who ran for mayor 2 years ago somewhere else. You will never be alone. You'll be part of a movement. And if you lose, it's not the end of the world. 2/3 of the folks we work with who lose say they want to run again. Because what happens on election day, no matter the outcome, is not the beginning nor the end of your civic engagement. It's just another step on the journey. And if you lose, we'll help you figure out how to put city council candidate on your resume, because how do you explain that? And if you win, we'll help you get ready to govern. It is being there for them every single step of the process, which the party's not going to do it. Most gatekeepers are not going to do it. Most even national Democratic organizations or even local ones aren't going to do it, because these are not the exciting, sexy races that are easy to raise money for or exciting and make headlines. But we believe they matter. And we believe these people, and we've seen it, are the future and the present, for what it's worth, of the Democratic Party and of our democracy. So that's what we say to folks.
And that has worked. And you said you have 130,000 people who've expressed interest. How many do you actively work with?
113,000 people have raised their hands. About 10% of the people who sign up with us actually get on the ballot, although sometimes it takes a couple years because you got to wait for the right time or the right opportunity. We have endorsed more than 2,000 in the lifetime of the organization. Sometimes we endorse multiple times. Sometimes people run and lose and then run again. And we've elected 640, 58% people of color, 56% women, 23% LGBTQ+. So about 40-ish% of the folks we work with ultimately win. The expected win rate for first-time candidates is about 10%. So it gives you a sense of how good our folks are.
That's awesome. So Representative McClinton, I wonder, what advice you would offer somebody, any of the people here, for example, who are thinking about jumping into the fray here in Pennsylvania? Like, every place is unique. Pennsylvania's unique. What would you advise them?
Absolutely. So I'd say, of course, it's 22 right now, so we're mid-season. We've got the primary next week. We have the general election November the 8th, but do not discount the work that happens under the dome in the state capitol. We have the ability in Harrisburg to do like all of everybody's top 10. Raise the minimum wage, repair the criminal justice system, defend women's independent ability to choose whatever they'd like to choose. That's not our business, hello. We have the ability to do like all the top 10s, whatever your top 10 is, we literally can fix it in Harrisburg. And at this moment, we currently have 90 members in the House Democratic Caucus. We need 12 more members to be in the majority and to be able to dictate which bills come up, which bills come forward, which bills go to the Senate, which bills get to the governor's desk. And we have the ability to just do great work. So don't discount us because you have to take a little trip to get there. My constituents tell me all the time, you're never in your office. I said, I'm a state representative. You know, I have to go to the state capitol. I know you're not thinking about all that, but I'm not able to go down to City Hall. I can get on the L and go to City Hall, but I don't have a badge, can't get in. I have to vote in Harrisburg. I have a badge, can get in there. So don't discount it. We need your voices, and we also encourage people to think about working in legislative offices. Had I never worked in a legislative office, 10 times out of 10, I would not be even invited to sit on this panel because I'd still be looking around for a nice law firm job. So consider working in a legislative office because you don't know where that will also take you. And I know the first time I went to Harrisburg on the floor of the Senate, I was just appalled going to your statistics. I'm like, everybody here is an older white man. Unbelievable. No wonder the laws are so bad. No wonder I was in court in an uphill battle. It all makes sense. And this was the interview. I was up there for an interview, and they're like, oh, come to the floor. And I just looked around like, these are the people in charge? Well, that explains everything. So,
You know, I was going to take the time to read, but then, you know, I don't really want to. This entire blue section here was so brilliant when I saw that, which is, here's a not even close to exhaustive list of issues a state legislator might work on over the course of a year. And it's incredible. It's alphabetical, which I appreciate. From abortion and adult education to transportation funding, tobacco, tort reform, financial literacy, food stamps, foreclosures. It's like everything, which was pretty incredible. And I knew it when I read it, but hadn't quite thought about it in that way. So, Councilman, young people, we tell, and I'm sure everybody in this room is going to or already has cast a ballot. I saw somebody here with a sticker, which I appreciated. I don't even know how you get a sticker if you vote by mail, but I appreciate that you have one on. I know that one of the ways that you get the change that you want is by voting, not just because you're electing the right people, but because then politicians know that somebody of your age and in your neighborhood voted. And we still don't have enough young people voting. So, what is it, is there something you're doing to try to encourage young people in particular to cast a ballot, or what can we do?
I go into schools all the time. I do voter registration events in schools. I go myself. I'm a former teacher, so I give the whole political science presentation. I try to make the information applicable to them. So when Meek Mill was released, that was a great time to inspire young people to get registered to vote, because you was able to draw a direct connection between something that they go through every day in life and how an election can have a direct impact on that. So every once in a while, we try to take these tangible examples and things that are happening in everyday life, try to inspire young people to vote. We also, I just sent a memo out advocating for $36 million for the city commissioner's office. Right now, the mayor has them budgeted at $22 million. They asked for $27 million, but the reason we asked for 36 is because we feel like as government, sometimes we don't do our part as it relates to people feel like government is working for them. And I don't even have to get into all the ways that people in Philadelphia feel like government isn't working for them right now. So, it's not a direct way that we suppress the vote, but it suppresses the vote. It's the reality of it. I feel like that if we could at least use some of this surplus that we're operating with right now to fix the system, right? We have a lot of broken systems, our prisons, our schools, our public transportation, and of course our elections. I probably could name a couple others. But we have an opportunity to fix the system, right? We have an opportunity to put the satellite office in different sections across the city of Philadelphia, to use the drop boxes and have people feel comfortable voting by mail. And the reason why I think that's, and also language access. And the reason why I think that all these things are important is because if we want to encourage the electorate to participate in the process, we have to make it as easy as possible, right? When we want people to spend money, we make it very easy for them to pay their bills, right? You can pay this way, you can pay that way, we give them so many different ways, and we make it right there at their phone. We want to make voting the same way. So that's what my office is doing directly to address the issue. But I also agree with State Rep McClinton around just the idea of encouraging young people to run for office. That's something I'm really passionate about. I've taken some bold endorsements, and I've endorsed some young people during my short term in city council. And the reason I felt like that's important is because at the end of the day, I know that people look at myself, and I will put KGR, definitely put Rep McClinton and Rep Harris and other people across the city in a special category of folks who they felt like have done something that is not attainable to them. And at the end of the day, you know, a lot of us in Philadelphia knows what it feels like. I know I do, and I bet a lot of folks do know what it feels like to be told wait your turn, or to be told that you can't do something. And at the end of the day, if we don't create some type of path for the next generation, you know, I'm going to be up here in a couple years saying the same thing the mayor said, whereas though, you know, I felt like we could aspire more people to run for office, but the bench is so weak. And I think that's our job as young elected officials to not just inspire, but to provide the resources and the access so that next generation can be supported. I'll, you know, give Rep. McClinton a shout out. She supported me when I ran, you know, and that absolutely matters, and it matters a lot when your colleagues or your future colleagues look at you and validate you, and they say, you know, this person should be an elected official. So I try to pass that same thing down to the next generation of elected officials.
Yeah, that bench, the bench is what you're talking about, which is, and we see that, we've seen that play out all over the country, and I find that really interesting. So we're going to take questions from the audience. Larry, but while Larry's walking around, think about your questions. Larry will bring you the mic. I'm going to ask the mayor just, what's something that, if somebody's thinking about running for office, what's something that you didn't know when you took office in Scranton that would have helped you in your job?
Wow. That's a really good question. There's so many things.
Got to have one really good question.
I really do think that the human resources piece, that human capital management piece, is so huge and it's so big, and there's so much wrapped up in that we have to change as a country. We have to change as a state. There's a lot of pieces of that human capital management within the city that I want to reflect our values and our progressive policies moving forward, but it's easier said than done. We need, at a city level, in a city like Scranton, Scranton's 80,000 people with a tight budget. While we're no longer distressed, it's still a tight budget. There's a lot more support that we need to make those policies match the vision that we have. So some of those people, and it's not just running for office, right? It's also like wanting to work in city government. I think we've done a really good job. We have an amazing team at this point. It's taken 2 years to really ramp. COVID has not helped. I've been pushing every single year. So finally, after 2 years of pushing for higher salaries and a bigger management organization, I mean, they just starved the management for years. We're still not where we're going to be, where we need to be in terms of parity of these jobs commensurate with even the public sector. But it's not just inspiring people to run, it's inspiring people to be the human resources director at the city of Scranton, right? So there's those pieces too, and I'm thinking that as we try to lift up our team, I'm hoping that some of the team will run for office themselves at some point. But it's a huge part of the job, and it's a great way to reflect our values, but a long way to go, and we need support from great people. And if anybody wants to work for the city of Scranton, I can talk to you afterwards. Internships, I don't see anybody too young out there, but let me know.
So we have a question here from this young lady. Before I get to that, it dawned on me that, Amanda, you haven't run for office. Do you plan to run for office? And if you do, Philadelphia might be a place for you because it would go over well the way that you curse like a Teamster.
No, I think you should run for office to solve the problem you care about, not because you want to be something, because you want to do something, and this is the problem I care about solving. Which is admittedly a very good politician answer, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'll hold the mic. No, I got it. Okay. I have a question for the mayor. Hearing Councilman Thomas talking about his experience of having other people really encouraging him to run and telling him sort of despite the odds, like, this is your time, it made me wonder it made me think about your story and about how it sounds like there were so many naysayers, you know, telling you were too young, too female, too pregnant, you know, too not from Scranton. Did you have anybody telling you, I mean, where did you get your encouragement from?
A couple of things. I mean, first and foremost, my family and friends support system is incredible. My husband, who is from Scranton, is an integral part of all of this. Not only does he feed me with very delicious sandwiches every day, but he really encouraged me to do this. because he said it would take somebody not from Scranton to get where we needed to go and build that trust back. And it meant something that he's from there. NLC was a huge part of it. I was an NLC fellow in winter, spring of 2019. We would have graduated in May 19, and then 6 weeks later, the mayor was indicted. So I was fresh off all of this incredible training, incredible friendships, meeting people who became members of my campaign team. That was great. And then the other piece of it, though, is my background. I was on a lot of campaigns, and so even when people would tell me something, I was in touch with a lot of my friends from those campaigns. I'd seen state and federal campaigns for many, many years, and that really, really helped. So, if somebody's young and eventually wants to run for something, I think working in the state house, working in the city government, working on a campaign is a really important thing, because you gain that muscle memory. You also gain an understanding of what it's going to be like. You're with the candidate. You see the ups. You see the downs. It gives you the confidence to move forward and get through some of those tough days.
Or you run 3 times, like Councilman Thomas.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
The Old Boys Network has gotten there, I think, because of an absentee of, elections that you can run and run and run and run again. Do you believe there should be term limitations?
So in particular, we do have term limits for the mayor's office in Philadelphia, but I think that's the only office, right, that has term limits? Councilman?
Yeah, I think the pressure's on me for that question, right? I do. I think term limits are important. I think that it depends on the seat. For somebody like State Rep McClinton, I don't think they should have term limits, because they're for the work they do in Harrisburg. Leadership is about tenure often. I think Rep. McClinton is an example of somebody who kind of broke in those barriers. But it's a lot of tradition in Harrisburg and in D.C. Around the idea of tenure being in a position of leadership. Locally, I feel like there should be term limits for legislative branches of government. I mean, I know that it's a big talking point on city council. I think one of the biggest issues that we have is when you look at the pension side of the seat, compared to what a term limit will consist of, there's some contradictions there. So you would have to, from a legal perspective, figure out how do you clean that up, right? Like, that's one of those things you learn when it's like you're campaigning and it sounds good, right? But then you get into office and you actually have to govern, and you have a city solicitor looking at you telling you, oh, that sounds great, but you're not going to be able to do it. So, you can introduce the bill, but there is a legal side of that I think that we have to figure out. But I personally do think that we should have term limits. I know a lot of people feel like your term limit is when the voters vote you out. I understand and respect that logic as well, too. I don't think that someone who has that perspective is flawed, but that's not the perspective that I have on the issue.
How many terms do you think city council people should have?
I'm not sure. I think that's the pension issue, right? Like, if you could straighten it out from a pension perspective, I think 4 terms would be more than enough if you could straighten it out from a pension perspective. But the problem is, again, if you put people in a position where they're termed out after 4 terms, they wouldn't even be fully eligible for their pension. So it creates some level of a legal contradiction on how do you address that, right? So it's like, oh, well, you just fixed the pension issue. Well, I mean, legally you can't pass a bill that way. So it's a little messy to try to figure out how you clean it up. I know one of my colleagues are actively working on it right now, and I'll be curious to see what the outcome is when they finish designing what that legislation is going to look like.
74% of Philadelphians support term limits for city council in a recent poll that we published. Not that matters. Questions? Yes, sir.
Hi there. Thank you all again for being here. My question is about one of the other things that's unique to, in some respects, to Pennsylvania, which is that we're a swing state. And I'm curious to what extent that provides opportunities and or barriers to getting people engaged, given that some folks might feel frustrated with the once every 4 years or once every 2 years sudden attention and desire for their vote. At the same time, there are a lot of resources pumped into those campaigns. So curious what you all think about that.
By the way, I'm sorry, what's your name?
My name is Elon Bookvar-Klein. I'm with Habitat for Humanity here in Philly.
Awesome. I meant to ask everyone to introduce themselves that way.
Either, I think anybody can.
I just want to take a page out of Amanda's book and remind everybody that elections are local. So, you know, when we do these national conversations, right, we vote every year, twice a year in Philadelphia. So I don't want anybody to think that there's ever an off year where we're essentially not voting or not trying to get people elected. So when we talk about the national climate and how the national climate impacts our elections, I'll let Rep. McClinton answer how it goes in Harrisburg, but for us locally in Philadelphia, that national climate sometimes has an impact on turnout for local elections. Sometimes when we look at our controller and our district attorney's race, it being right after a presidential year, sometimes people say we have like voter fatigue, right? But I see my colleague and my council member here, Councilmember Parker, her area where we live, there's never really opportunity for voter fatigue, right? Like our community in our area where we live, folks tend to be engaged all the time, no matter what's going on or no matter who's on the ballot. So I think part of it depends on the branch of government that you're in, but then another part of it depends on the community that you live in as well, too.
My 2 cents on that is that since being an elected official, I've made a lot of efforts in my community to tell and teach and model to young people why they should participate. We definitely all, no matter where your district is, have seniors that always know when the election is coming. Like, they literally have it on their calendar. They know whether it's an even year, whether it's an odd year, what we're choosing, what judges, council members, DA, state senate, governor. Like, they literally know. But we have a big disconnect with the general public when it is not a federal election. I mean, how many of us are inundated, whether we're on social media or watching the regular TV, with these federal ads? You know, both hands, everybody is. You can't get through YouTube unless you have a subscription to not hear from someone who's running for United States Senate. So when we have those high profile campaigns, it is just not as significant. For instance, last year when we had people running for the highest courts of our Commonwealth, we saw a very low turnout. We saw a lot of voter apathy. To go from November 2020, where there were signs that, you know, 3 of them could fit in this room, vote now Philly, you know, very large, get out the vote sign. I'm looking at you, Jared. I know you had something to do with that. But, you know, there was a great turnout because we needed to defeat the former president, right? We needed to do that. But you don't see that same money, and you definitely don't see that same energy when it's over. And so we have to look around ask ourselves, how do we keep that momentum going? How do we go from vote today, Philly, vote here, vote now with large posters to we have courts. Courts decide our rights. We need to make sure that we're electing folks across the Commonwealth. We can get these seats in the Superior Court. We could have flipped it, but people weren't voting. And then we have to also look at what are these conditions that suppress the vote? And you mentioned that a little bit earlier, Councilmember Thomas, that there are conditions in our communities that make people say, go to the polls for what? And we have to change those as well.
So do you think it would make a difference if we had, I know there's talk sometimes of having like the mayoral race of just keeping elections to even years, right? When there's also federal races, and because people tend to come out more. Are you in favor of that, or do you think that?
I just want to add this. I think another thing that would kind of like neutralize that is if our nation made voting a priority the way it does other things. It should be a holiday. There's also that. It's like odd year, even year, you know, governor, mayor. These are significant roles. They're huge roles. Folks have big decisions that they're making, staffs of hundreds and thousands. Like, we need to actually, you know, say, okay, voting is important. It's a priority. Why do we have folks trying to juggle their lives around this? Why do we have folks who can't get off? We just were able to vote by mail. And since more people voted than ever, what do the Republicans in my Harrisburg want to do? Get rid of it. God forbid people actually voted. We got to get rid of this measure. We got to get rid of it. Too many people voted. Too many people had the access and the options and the flexibility.
And to add to that, it was their bill, right? Like, the original vote by mail bill in Harrisburg was a Republican legislation that they in turn eventually
all voted for it.
Exactly. I agree with the election day being a holiday. I think that that's a really important component of getting people to vote and encouraging people to come out to vote. I just wanted to put an emphasis on that. We introduced a resolution around that. We've been pushing it, and I think that's a really important component when we're talking about it. I also think if we want to increase turnout, I wouldn't move the mayor. I'm a big fan of an elected school board or a hybrid school board, and I bet you if you had that election the same time that you had the district attorney and the city controller's election, that would then help drive some of the turnout as well as the city of Philadelphia. But I wouldn't move the mayoral race just because then we would see even more suppression when we went to go vote for judge and city council and other races that would be down ticket.
Right, true.
The other piece is the money piece, right? So if, like right now, the U.S. Senate races with Oz and McCormick and all their money that just oozes from their pockets, that is raising the rates of all of the media for the entirety of the state, right? So state rep candidates are trying to get on TV, and it's exorbitantly expensive. It's already expensive, but now it's even more expensive. So that would be my concern if we moved local to those federal years, that we would just, as long as we have money in politics like we do now, there's no way that we would ever be able to get on air.
And just to say from the national perspective, no one ever says to me, the context is perfectly right for me to run for office. It's a blue state, I could never win. It's a red state, I could never win. It's a swing state, it's too competitive, I could never win. You can always win. Or you might lose, and who cares? But like, it is never the perfect political context.
Got one more over here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Monet Riley. So we talked a lot tonight about gatekeeping and how the party didn't want you in, and you know it's not your turn yet. But at some point, all of you are elected. So at some point, you become that machine that you were once fighting against to get into politics. So how do you, I guess, stay true to yourself if you want more young people to come into office, you want more people to run, but there's this system that protects incumbents? How do you balance wanting to get more people involved while also not pushing them out because you want to keep your seat, if that makes sense?
Ooh, good question.
I'm the out-of-towner. I'll start with this one. Where we are in Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, the machine lives on today. The county party does its thing. Me and my team basically do our thing, and we're the office that people come to canvass. We're the office that people come to get phone bank sheets. If you want to get something done, you come to our office and our team. If you want to go to brunch, you go to the county party. So we've done this assessment and we've looked and we thought, there's 400 committee seats or something. We don't have the bandwidth or the ability to shift the entire party overnight. We've got some cycles to go before the county's really going to be in a place where the priorities and the vibe and the work ethic is really what it needs to be. So what we've tried to do is just triangulate and have our office be that hub, show what it means to do the hard work and kind of run it in a different way. So we're still very much not the machine. And it's with its perils, because the machine still, the Democratic Party will still, if there's a special election, still chooses the candidate in a way that I don't think is right. But we'll try to keep pushing and pushing and pushing as much as we can, and we'll keep going.
I have a quick follow-up to that, Mayor. As time goes on with that strategy, are you still going to be able to campaign as the outsider?
I mean, in locally in Lackawanna County, I'm still that's just absolutely the case, and we'll continue to try to support people that want to run, and I talk to a lot of different groups, and we try to get that going. We have a great local paper that continues to publicize local races and those types of things, so we'll keep going with that. The county party is having its election right now. I'm not involved in it at all. I think I could argue it both ways, that I should try to get in there, but you got to pick your battles, right? And so I think the battle that we're fighting to bring back trust to city government is where we have to focus. We'll try to hire on great people and encourage people to be civically minded, running for office, being on the school board, working at City Hall, and we have to kind of do that in parallel with this county party until I'd say at least another cycle probably.
What do you mean by the local paper? They've been a partner in reform?
Just so we had talked about this earlier, and I appreciate the Philadelphia Citizen. We still have a local family-run paper in Scranton, Scranton Times Tribune, and the same with the Citizen's Voice in Wilkes-Barre. If not for that paper still being on top of all the local issues every single day, it's a full paper at my door 7 days a week. If not for that, I don't think that a lot of this corruption would have been uncovered in the last year. So we really have to fight for that. They keep a lot of these issues at the fore, and it's very important that we support local media.
Thank you. That is, I think, a really good place to end on the support local media. Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and thank you all for all the work that you do.